I made the mistake of opening my marriage in secret, and now I want my husband and my life back. I'm 25 years old. I'm 25 and my boyfriend is 26. We started dating when I was 18 and he was 19. We were together for 3.5 years before moving in together when he finished college. Since then, we've been living together and our relationship is fantastic. We're not only a couple, but also best friends, and we share a deep romantic connection. I'm crazy about him and hope to marry him one day, as well as become the mother of his children. I had hoped we'd be married by now, but I respect his decision to establish himself before making such a significant commitment. Recently, a new colleague joined our company, and I was responsible for bringing him on board and providing basic training. His name is Jay, and he's a former professional athlete in great shape. The twist is that Jay is married, and he and his wife have an open marriage. They have a child together conceived while she was still married to another man, and she continues to have a physical relationship with her ex and others. During one of our conversations, Jay shared all of this with me initially. I found it to be quite an unusual and unconventional situation, especially the dynamic his wife has with her ex. When the topic came up, Jay asked me for my thoughts on open relationships. I made it clear that I was completely against the idea and that I would never want to share my husband or be with another man. Our discussion on this matter ended with Jay suggesting, "Let me know if you ever want to try it sometime. I think you would change your mind." I was surprised by his comment, but I brushed it off with a laugh and changed the subject. As the weeks have gone by, Jay and I have grown closer in our work relationship. I must admit that I've developed a strong physical attraction to him in the past week. We've started flirting with each other, and I'm becoming concerned because I can see where this is heading. I haven't discussed any of this with my boyfriend because I know he'd end the relationship straight away. It's not that he's possessive, but he firmly believes in the concept of one woman and one man in a relationship. Even just flirting with Jay would be a major breach of his trust. I've decided to take a risk and talk to my boyfriend about open relationships to see if he's interested. For those who have experience with this, I have a few questions. 1. How did you bring up the topic? 2. What did you say? 3. How did it affect your relationship with your partner? Did it improve or worsen? I talked to my boyfriend about it, but he immediately rejected the idea. I didn't directly ask for an open relationship. Instead, I mentioned Jay. I told my boyfriend that Jay was a new colleague and that my coworkers mentioned that their marriage was open. I was talking to some colleagues about their marriages, and one couple mentioned that they were in an open marriage and that their wife still had a physical relationship with her ex. My boyfriend's immediate response was that it was disgusting. He went on to say that Jay must be foolish because no man would accept his part being intimate with another man. He also had some less pleasant words for Jay's wife in response. I just laughed, agreed with him, and changed the subject. It seems like my desire to be physically intimate with Jay won't be fulfilled, at least not in the near future. In the meantime, I plan to increase our activities at home to satisfy this. I have an update on the burning longing within me. I made a mistake that has cost me my relationship with my boyfriend and any hope of marrying him and having children together. In my last update, I mentioned that my boyfriend had rejected the idea of an open relationship. I decided not to pursue it any further. Well, a week later, my boyfriend went to Chicago for a trade show, and I was home alone from Tuesday through Thursday that week. On Tuesday morning, Jay and I were flirting a lot at work. During our lunch break on Wednesday, we went to his apartment and had sex. I really regret this now, and I can't believe how foolish and selfish I was. We repeated the same on Thursday, but the physical aspect was satisfying, but not the same as what I have with my boyfriend. Jay has an attractive physique, but he couldn't match the emotional connection I have with my boyfriend. So our purse. After our meeting on Thursday, I felt like our encounters were empty. I had planned to make it our last, but I didn't want to hurt Jay's feelings, so I didn't say anything that day. On a different note, I was shocked by the way Jay and his wife live. Their apartment is packed with exercise equipment, and it's in disarray with clothes scattered everywhere and things out of place. My boyfriend and I are quite tidy, so this really bothered me and somewhat detracted from the experience. Sorry for going off topic, but I needed to get that off my chest. It really bothered me. Moving on to Thursday, my relationship with my boyfriend and my hopes for a happy life took an abrupt turn when I arrived home. My boyfriend was already there, and I could sense something was wrong. He was standing by the door wearing his coat and holding his car keys. I was excited to see him and tried to kiss and hug him, but he kept me at arm's length with his hand. Then he said something that shattered me. He told me he had been near. I was contacted on social media by Jay's wife, who asked if I'd like to meet up and possibly go on a date. Now that Jay and I were involved physically, they'd had a call, and she'd spilled all the details about my relationship with Jay. Apparently, she and Jay enjoy being with other couples, which is their biggest turn-on. I was so shocked, I felt like I might faint, so I had to sit down. I immediately began explaining and apologizing, but he simply said, "Be quiet." Then he gave me an eviction notice he'd created using an online template. He said he'd file it legally and that I had 30 days to move out. He said he'd be staying with his parents and not to contact him. I was really upset and tried to reach out to him again, but he just left. I tried to catch up with him, but he was too fast. I tried to contact him for the next 3 hours, but he didn't respond. I then called his mom to ask if he was with her. She said he was, but he couldn't speak. When I asked if I could come over, she said no. Hearing her say that tore me apart. I tried to explain that I had made a terrible mistake and would never hurt him again, but she just said okay, and I also asked if I had anything else to say when I declined her invitation. She simply said, "Take care and have a nice life," before hanging up on me. I felt miserable throughout the night and kept sending texts to my boyfriend. Some of them now seem crazy when I look back on them. Among other things, I repeatedly apologized, professed my love for him, and emphasized that he was the only one I loved. I also sent him a text where I stated that the physical relationship with Jay meant nothing. I told him it was just a foolish experiment and that he was far superior. It might not have been the best thing to say, but it was true. I thought maybe boosting his ego would make him break down and reach out to me, but it didn't. The following day, I drove to his office. I didn't enter the building, though. Instead, I sent him a text, letting him know that I was waiting outside in the parking lot and intended to stay there all day because I wanted to talk to him. He didn't respond, but around 11, it was 10 p.m., I was waiting for him at my car at 11. I saw him walking towards my car, and I was so moved by his handsome face that I started to cry. I love this man so much, and I really hoped he would come to my side, pull me out of the car, and start hugging and kissing me. Instead, he walked around to the passenger side and got in. We spent the next hour talking, and he let me express myself without interruption. Once I had poured out all my thoughts and feelings, he said that cheating was a deal breaker for him and that our relationship was effectively over. He said he wanted to keep things civil, but that he didn't want to be involved with me anymore. I kept asking for a second chance, but he was firm. As our conversation was ending, I asked where I would go when I moved out. I knew I couldn't afford an apartment. I was on my own in the city, so I asked him where I would go. He said I'd have to figure that out, but he'd give me a check for his share of our expenses for a month to help me get started in a new place. I tried to beg and plead, but he kept saying no. I asked if I could kiss and hug him, and he said I could hug him, but he didn't kiss me, but we hugged for about 10 minutes before he pulled away. He went back to his office, leaving me in tears for about an hour. I've got some new questions now. Is someone really sorry for cheating? Is there any hope for my relationship? What can I do to rebuild my boyfriend's trust in me? I want to say that this was just a one-time thing. I'm looking for advice from women who have been in similar situations. I'd love to hear about how you managed to salvage your relationships. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to win him back because I'm struggling without him. I'd like to thank everyone who has responded so far. I've also had some great responses to this post, which has really helped. I'm really embarrassed about what happened, so I've been too ashamed to tell anyone. This community has been a great source of support. Thank you all so much. I just wanted to give you an update. It's been a while since I've checked in, and many of you have been asking about my relationship. Unfortunately, my boyfriend and I have broken up. Despite my efforts to convince him to give us another chance, we've decided to go our separate ways. I realized that he wasn't going to change his mind, so I ended up quitting my job and relocating to my hometown. I'm temporarily staying with my parents until I can get back on my feet. I couldn't afford to live in the city on my own, and I wanted to avoid working at the same company as Jay. I decided to move back home. I really regret that he found out now. I feel like he has ruined my life. I understand that I can start over, but it's an incredibly challenging process. Finding a man might be easy, but finding an amazing man like my ex is really difficult. My boyfriend is really difficult. My grandma used to say that finding a great man is like finding a diamond in a coal mine. She said that if you ever find one, you should hold on to it and cherish it forever. She told me numerous times that she believed my boyfriend was a diamond and I was one of the lucky ones. It turns out she was absolutely right about my ex. My ex-boyfriend seems to be doing well without me. He's thriving in his job and has never attempted to contact me. I sent several texts during the holidays, but he never responded, so I eventually gave up. I'm currently struggling with depression, but I recently started individual counseling, and it's proving to be quite helpful. I want to address something here in response to some of the negativity within this community. The notion that once a cheater, always a cheater doesn't hold true. I can assure you that I will never cheat on a partner again. My counselor also mentioned that many individuals who cheat typically don't repeat their actions. So, there you have it, a professional perspective on it. To those who've been supportive, thank you very much. But to those who are still skeptical, I'm sorry you feel that way. That was a fun story, but let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. I'm a 22-year-old female. And I'm looking to get my 25-year-old. I want to give you a quick summary of what happened with my ex. I accidentally cheated on him, and I'm feeling really guilty and upset that my friends told him about it. I need help figuring out what to say to him. A few days ago, I made a mistake in my relationship with my boyfriend of 2 years. I can't handle the guilt anymore. I used to believe he was the love of my life. I was really invested in my relationship with my boyfriend. We'd been together for a couple of years, and things were good. We went on dates, he bought me things, but I started to feel less important. There was a lack of spontaneity. I talked to him about it, hoping we could resolve things. Then one night, my friends and I went out, and I was seeing. We were having a great time and dancing when a group of guys started dancing with us. I felt a bit overwhelmed because I wasn't used to being so close to other guys, but I made sure none of them got too close from behind, so I thought it was fine. After dancing for a few minutes, we sat down and started talking. There was one guy I was chatting with. There was another guy there who was pretty cute and friendly. He asked for my number, so I gave him a fake one. Some guys can be persistent, so I left it at that and moved away from him. Then another guy from the group approached me and noticed I wasn't mingling as freely as my friends. We started talking, and he mentioned that he had recently ended a long-term relationship. I should have stopped there, but I couldn't resist asking him what had happened with his ex. He said their relationship had become dull and routine, lacking excitement. I shared that I felt the same way and asked why he didn't stay with her. He said he enjoyed the freedom of meeting other women. We chatted for the rest of the night without any commitments until my friends and I decided to leave. He gave me his number on the way to my friend's house. I texted him to say I'd get an Uber and go home, but instead I went to his house. It was a nice place with his own home. When I got there, I saw a fancy car in the driveway. We kept chatting and ended up kissing and having sex. I cuddled with him and was about to leave, but we started kissing again and ended up having sex again. I fell asleep in his bed the next morning. I felt really bad because I hadn't meant to. My boyfriend tried calling and texting me, but I didn't answer. Some of my friends texted and even called my dad to check if I was okay. Eventually, I left his place and called my dad to reassure him that I was fine, saying that my phone had run out of battery. When I arrived at our place, my boyfriend asked me how I was. I was a bit confused about what to say, so I just mentioned that I'd gone to a friend's house after our outing and dozed off there after taking a shower. I was overwhelmed by my emotions and started to cry. I never intended for things to unfold the way they did the previous night. When I finished showering, he was waiting for me. He told me that a friend had messaged him saying I'd taken an Uber home holding my phone. He explained that he'd checked the location and read my text messages. He checked my text messages and confronted me, asking if I'd cheated on him the previous night. I reassured him I hadn't and would never do such a thing, but he remained silent. I wanted him to embrace me, but when I tried to reach out to him, he retreated. Finally, he told me to leave before he called the authorities, so I reluctantly left. It's been a few days. Since then, I've been trying to get him back. He meant everything to me. I've been struggling to eat and sleep, and I've even skipped classes. I've also distanced myself from my friends, feeling that they played a role in ruining my relationship. It's disheartening that one mistake has led to this outcome. Has anyone gone through a similar situation? Is there anything I can say or do to win him back or make amends? A few days ago, I summoned the courage to return to our apartment. I went back to our apartment to try to salvage what I could of our relationship. I was disappointed to find it was completely empty, except for my clothes and a few bits and pieces I'd bought myself. It felt like walking into a scene from a horror movie. The place was cold and empty, and there was nothing there to remind us of our shared memories. It was like he'd wiped away all traces of himself from our home. Every possession of his had disappeared. The furniture, appliances, even my laptop, which he'd given me, and the food he'd stocked in the fridge. The apartment had been stripped down to its bare essentials. The only thing left in the fridge was a bag of pretzels that I'd bought for myself. He'd taken everything he'd brought with him. When we first moved in together, I was overcome with panic and tried calling him, but he didn't answer. I felt shocked and abandoned. Who could do such a thing? Did he really care so little about me that he left me in an empty house? It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. There was no response and no sign of him. I'm utterly lost and don't know what to do next. How can I even begin to make things right? Is this situation even legal? We both signed the lease. So shouldn't I have been informed if he was breaking the lease? What about my laptop? I was the primary user and all my files were on it. I need to recover them as well. Does anyone have any advice to offer? The lease. Shouldn't I have been informed if he was breaking the lease? And what about my laptop? I was the primary user and all my files were on it. I need to recover them as well. Does anyone have any advice to offer? Update. I reached out to my ex using a different phone number. He informed me that he's finished with our relationship and is already relocated. He advised me not to search for him while he hasn't officially terminated the lease. He has no intention of renewing it in May. He was adamant about keeping the laptop, saying it was legally his since he had the receipt. I explained that I only needed it to copy my files, but he had already formatted it and wiped all the data. He did the same with me, so what steps should I take next? You might not like me after hearing my story, but remember, you're here for a tale of revenge. I'm currently a 36-year-old. I'm going to change the names a bit here. My ex-wife, Rebecca, is now 34. We met at college and got married in our early 20s. I was 25 and she was 23. Our marriage had a rocky start. I was studying medicine while she was doing accounting. Some things were fine with me, but they bothered her. Despite being married, she acted as if she were single. I have to admit that back then I didn't see it as a problem. Let's jump to 2016 when she landed a job as an accountant. I was pleased because it paid well, and the company owner, James, happened to be a college buddy of mine. As time passed, instead of growing closer, tensions mounted between us. She began complaining about various things she disliked. Our living situation had issues with my actions, and she lost her taste for the food she once loved. I'm a great cook, and she used to love my meals. Our arguments got worse and worse until she started calling me worthless and saying she earned more than I did. This might seem like a normal part of many relationships, as most couples have their ups and downs, but if it had stopped there, I wouldn't be sharing my story. If I hadn't heard from our mutual friends that Rebecca and James were spending time together, I wouldn't be sharing my story. I found it odd that she was hanging out with him and that they were socializing with our mutual friends without me knowing. I confronted both of them. And they explained it was a last-minute plan that didn't include me because I was working and out of town that day. Maybe they'd planned it in advance, but I'm not sure, so I let it go. Then came 2017, the year my marriage fell apart. I became increasingly suspicious. For those of you in relationships, you know it's texting. If your intimate life suddenly disappears, it's a warning sign. I grew more paranoid, and whenever I tried to discuss things, I was met with resistance. I'm not perfect. I started yelling at her constantly, demanding answers because something felt wrong. Your closest person in life seldom talks or spends time with you. They say there's nothing wrong. Does that seem normal? It can't be. This should have been a fantastic year for us. We both paid off our student loans and were reaching our financial peak. It should have been a great time. My friends and I had the idea to open a small medical shop as a side business. One of those Saladin was there too. He suggested we celebrate at a pub while we were there. I noticed a woman who looked exactly like Rebecca. It wasn't too alarming, but it caught my attention. She was dancing with another man, and the lighting was dim as I got a closer look. Lo and behold, it was Rebecca and James dancing hand in hand. I could say it didn't bother me much because they're friends and colleagues. I was there with my colleagues, and she was with hers. But of course it was bothering me, so I decided to send her a text asking where she was. She usually heads home at this time. She replied that she was already at home. This was a major red flag for me. It was like a huge red flag, almost like a communist parade. I told her to stop lying because it was clear she wasn't being truthful. She seemed to get paranoid and texted that she was on her way home. After that, she left the pub and I followed shortly on my way back home. I knew I needed to have a direct conversation with her. I had a chat with her about James when I got home. I asked her about it in person, and her reaction was pretty surprising. It was like she'd seen a ghost, because she clearly wasn't expecting that question. She didn't react very well, to be honest. When I've asked about a friend before, they've been more open. She tried to play it off, but as I listened to her speak, I already had a strong suspicion that something was seriously wrong that night. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to snoop through her phone. Please don't judge me, but I felt compelled to find out the truth. We had known each other's passwords, but I couldn't access it because she'd changed her password. However, the following day I managed to get it. I know it's not the best course of action, but I was desperate to uncover the truth, and there it was. A multitude of texts, countless questionable pictures, degrading comments, and even her referring to him. As my wife and I had promised each other that we would always be open with each other, she had broken that vow too. She had told him how thrilling she had found that night at the pub. I had gone through everything, and the thing that hurt the most was that she had told me. She said that if either of us ever got bored in the relationship or needed to spice things up, we would let each other know. She'd broken my trust. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I went to bed and cried deeply into the night. I want you to know that I'd thought about coming up with a plan to get Tret. I thought about going to her secretly, but I didn't. I was overwhelmed with anger and emotion the next morning. I made the mistake of confronting her without any evidence in hand. She yelled at me and stormed out, accusing me of being abusive and insane. That afternoon, her friends created a messenger group where they all teamed up to breast dance. She had apparently told all our friends that I was abusive when she returned home that night. She informed me that she was in love with James and wanted a divorce. I asked her to talk it over first, but it turned into her berating me. I yelled back, and she didn't hesitate to call the cops when they arrived. I was told to spend the night elsewhere. I went to my sister's, and when I returned the next morning, James's car was parked there. Are you kidding me? It was clear. No further explanation was needed. He was intentionally doing it. Actually, she was intentionally doing it as well. I consulted with a lawyer since we didn't. She already had a prenuptial agreement in place. She had also filed a complaint against me for being abusive, which didn't bode well for me. She never attempted to apologize or make amends, not once. Unfortunately, our country's laws don't consider infidelity a fault. So even with that, she's entitled to half of everything I have. Her complaint could lead to a lawsuit against me. A few days later, I was lucky to stay at my sister's house for the time being. I tried reaching out to Rebecca, but she wouldn't respond to me. Then she contacted me and suggested we get a divorce. That's it, after 12 years of being in a relationship and 4 years of marriage. She ended it with a text, which made things worse. I thought James was taking my place when I first saw her. She then gave me the divorce papers. Everyone in our circle thought I was the bad guy, and James was her savior. They thought she did the right thing by leaving me. She was cheating on me. We were officially divorced at the beginning of 2018. She was openly dating James during our divorce. He became her life, and she was doing much better without me. I lost my job, my house, my reputation, and some of our mutual friends, all because of her affair and lies. I had to relocate to a different city. To start afresh, Saladin was a great help. He got me a decent job, even if it wasn't quite what I was used to. It was better than some of the other options out there, as I worked hard to rebuild my life. Saladin and I became close friends. My dating life was basically over because I found it difficult to trust anyone. There was no communication between Rebecca and me, and the last I heard was that she had moved in with James, and they were doing well. Fast forward to the end of 2020, and my life was actually improving despite the global pandemic forcing us to work tirelessly. With sore backs, our pharmacy business took off, and I was able to earn a good income. A friend told me that James and Rebecca had split up. I was surprised to hear that James, her hero, had cheated on her and left her in a tough spot. He'd abandoned her. On top of that, she was raising a child that was undoubtedly James's. He'd been absent since the baby was born and hadn't even acknowledged the child by signing the birth certificate. So now, Rebecca's raising that child as a single parent. I heard she tried dating after James left, but she claims she's still not over him. I have to say, I was pretty pleased with myself at the time. I missed having her around, though, so I sent her an email to ask how she was doing. She didn't expect to hear from me, but we ended up exchanging emails, and we got back in touch after several years. When I saw her again in 2021, she looked a lot worse. She'd gained weight, lost her sparkle, and seemed tired all the time. She opened up about James and brought up the old issues about her infidelity and lies. I got some closure. I suppose it provided a bit of relief. She apologized and admitted she wasn't thinking clearly. She said James had poisoned her mind against me. Her appearance alone infuriated me and fueled a desire for vengeance. It was evident that karma had already caught up with her. I caught up with her, and the difficulties of life had led to her current situation. I felt that I should offer her some support, but remember the advice I gave you at the beginning. Even though she had done some wrong, I had also made mistakes. You can judge me, but that is not why I am here. I felt the urge to exact revenge, and I did. I wasn't finished with her. I told her I would forgive her if she told everyone the truth and cleared my name. She did that, even if it meant losing many friends. My name was cleared, but she had to face the consequences because it was the truth. She essentially forced me to raise James. I told her I was interested in starting over, but only if we took it seriously. That meant we needed to start dating again and seriously consider marriage first. Only then would I consider legally adopting her child. I have to admit, the little guy was adorable, and I had grown fond of him. Here's the ugly truth. I was already seeing someone else. I was basically cheating on that woman with Rebecca. She was a client of mine from another country. We were in a long-distance relationship, so we were dating, but it wasn't entirely exclusive. That's what I mean. Her name is Lisa. Lisa was Saladin's cousin. I had already informed her. I told her what had happened. She was against my revenge plan at first, but she was happy to help me out. She understood that I needed to go through with it. Rebecca and I were living in different cities, so I never moved in with her. I told her I needed to travel a lot for work, which made her think I was going to move in with her. I ended up disappointing her, just like she had done to me. The worst thing is that we had sex, but we used protection. I genuinely believed she'd found love again. I encouraged her to seek therapy to address her issues. Everyone noticed how much better and happier she seemed now that she was with me. She would frequently express gratitude for her good fortune, always followed by apologies directed at me. She started doing things for me that she used to do when we were married and deeply in love. Trust me when I say I had a lot of emotions tied to this woman. I reconsidered my revenge plan and started having doubts about breaking her heart the way I had fantasized. It would be terrible. It was a traumatic experience that stayed with me for life. Then I remembered what she'd done to me when we were married. We'd made vows and she broke them. James may be an awful person, but she chose to betray me. She didn't think twice about breaking my heart, so why should I hesitate to think about hers? I decided to proceed with my plan. Her birthday was approaching last October, and lockdown restrictions had eased up. Someone important to me, Lisa, was in my city as a birthday gift. I invited Rebecca to go ring shopping. She chose her favorite ring, and I had it wrapped. That night, she came to me in tears, apologizing for hurting me. She seemed genuinely remorseful, but I had no feelings left for her except indifference. On Rebecca's birthday, I drove her to our favorite spot, the same place where we got married. It's a beautiful spot, surrounded by nature. Lisa was already there, so when we arrived, I introduced Lisa to Rebecca as my girlfriend. Rebecca turned pale and asked what I meant. She wanted to know what she meant to me, so I introduced her Lisa as Rebecca, my ex. My wife and friend with benefits at that moment, I proposed to Lisa using that same ring. Rebecca lost her composure and began yelling. I responded by questioning how she could possibly expect us to reconcile when she had destroyed everything. I made it clear that I could never date someone like her again. She kept asking if everything we had meant nothing, and my response was a resounding no. Our last moments together were merely a form of closure. I helped her confront the truth, the pain she had caused me. Lisa was holding me back, concerned about Rebecca's suffering. I firmly insisted that Rebecca needed to leave, and eventually she did. Afterwards, she repeated her previous actions. She told everyone that I had cheated and portrayed me as the villain. This time, I took it in stride, and everyone saw her for the deceitful person she was. She had cheated on me and made me pay a steep price through false abuse allegations. Now she expected me to raise that shame. She also had a child from her affair partner and said she wanted to date me. The last time we spoke was in December of last year. She wrote me a letter saying she was sorry for the pain she had caused me and that she hoped I would have a better life. I heard that she wasn't interested in dating. She hadn't improved her appearance either. In my case, you can probably figure it out. Lisa and I ended our relationship. There were other issues between us, not just what happened. Some people claim that I'd like to know exactly what you mean by worse than my ex. I loved her and she cheated on me, which resulted in me losing my home, my job, my reputation, and my friends. I behaved poorly towards everyone, and I gave her a taste of her own medicine by hurting someone else. But am I now worse than her? I might have emotionally hurt her, but that's what she did to me. I'm not seeking judgment. I'm sharing my revenge story, and this is what you call nuclear revenge. Thank you.